Hi all, it's that time of the week again. It's the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name is Thomas Williams and tonight's date is August the 31st. You can stick your new world order up your ass. You can stick your new... Hi all, and that was Riding the Storm Out. There'll be elements of riding the storm out in more ways than one in tonight's show. Obviously it's a big topic of debate, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some clarity to it, and we'll see where we head with it. Alright, first things first, this is the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name's Thomas Williams. I know we're getting a lot of new listeners, and first things first, we'll get on with the email for the show. So if you want to ask questions to this show or pass comment, I know some of you pass comment on the YouTube. I don't always get a chance to get to that, but sometimes I'm able to pull it up and bring it forth for the show. Anyway, the email is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com, and the link for the show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955891. Now, I've mentioned this a number of times now, because I'm still getting emails or questions about the Faction show or the UPU show or some of the other bigger shows, the Illuminati show or the Kingdom of Mana show, the extra shows that we put on from time to time that provides the basis of the knowledge to be able to listen to this show in many ways and make sense of what is really going on around the world. So we have an articles website called thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. Now all the biggest shows, and we've done about 10 now, the Future of Humanity, the first Shane the Ruiner show, which covered many aspects, the Faction show, the two Levershoff shows, the Kingdom of Mana, the UPU show, the Faction show I think I've mentioned, and the two Svarli shows. If you are able to listen to them in order, you will then have a bigger understanding of what is playing out. You'll understand the control structure, you'll understand who's who, what's what, and when's when and why. So if you are new to this show, follow those shows in date order. If you want to listen to and catch up, that would be my advice, but they're on the thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. That's the articles website, and there's some articles there, and there's some of Chloe's writings on the Saturn Moon Matrix and a few other things, the grounding, centering and shielding, which is going to be prevalent in the coming days, because things are ramping up big time. You'll find this out in the show, and I'm going to cover some aspects of it. For those of you who don't like Facebook, we have the Facebook page called The Truth, Honour and Integrity. If you don't like Facebook but you like the social media side, you can join MeWe. Some have had difficulty joining direct, but if you send an email to the truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com, we can add you onto that site. Then there's the People's Club. The website link and the donations is thepeoplesclub.org. That's the foundation that is waiting to roll. Yes, we've waited a long time, but I think more and more are now seeing why the funds haven't been released, and there's more of that in today's show. Alright, a couple of things before we get into the news items and cover some bits. Congratulations to John and Laura Bryan, our first THI baby. if memory serves me correctly. Apologies if it doesn't. So congratulations to them. John will actually be on the next evening with Thomas on Sunday at 4:30 p.m. EST, and I've just been passed the messages. I've forgotten about it, and apologies for that. But all the key THI shows are also on www.inm.tv. So that's Victoria's site. So they're all on there as well. Right, where are we? Did I cover all that? Oh yeah, and the other one is happy birthday to John Darash, because John's been on our show, on both shows, but he has been on THI as well as Cosmic Voice, so we wish him happy birthday. We do have intel tonight, and there's given what's going on in Houston and the surrounding areas, there's a fair bit of op-ed pieces on that as well, but we'll get into some news. Now, one of the things that's been said, again this is being mentioned for the new listeners, is a lot of people will start losing it. A lot of people will start exposing themselves, and we're seeing this more and more now. This was forecast last year. The masks of illusion, and they're all coming down, whether you're the cabal or you're not, and you can call it a source intervention of some sort, or you can call it whatever you like, but it's happening, and things are being revealed on a scale now that was unimaginable to all of us in the alternative community, even as far back as 12 months ago. 5 years ago, this time would be unthinkable. We'd all be jumping through hoops. But what you're finding is a number of the so-called high-profile people stepping out. We've already reported on the breakdown of Katy Perry and others. And the latest is Lady Gaga, and a quote on a new up-and-coming show where she says, "I'm alone, Brandon, every night, and all these people will leave." She says, seemingly crying on the phone to an unknown friend in one post, "They will leave, and then I'll be alone. And I go from everyone touching me all day and talking at me all day to total silence." This is what's taken place. In other words, she or he, as some have alleged, is another one now admitting that there's people using her all day. So that, to me, is a reference to the sex slavery that Britney Spears has gone through, Katy Perry has gone through, and all the other Disney people. Miley Cyrus is another one. But they're now coming out in more ways than one. You're going to see a lot more of this. It will increase. I think they've had enough as well. But with all the one wonders what's going to happen with the Super Bowl, with Katy Perry speaking out, Lady Gaga speaking out, which clown are going to put forward next year. Maybe there won't be any left. Maybe. So this is a report from the Labour Department data, and it's fairly damning, as most of you will know. Unlike what the Federal Reserve state, or what they stated a couple of weeks ago, was America is at capacity of full employment. Yeah, right. So the report states that half the jobs in America currently pay less than $18 an hour, which works out about $37,000 a year if someone works full time. And 40% of the jobs in the country pay less than $15.15 an hour. I would say there's more than that. And there's always debate about what constitutes a good paying job. But it's kind of notable that manufacturing jobs, which, let's not forget, President Trump campaigned on bringing back, sometimes pay over $20 an hour on average. Sometimes, not always. And the latest report on America's job market came out in early August this time, and showed that wages are only up 2.5% from a year ago. That's well below the historic average for the country, and it's about the same rate of increase as the final years of the Obama administration. So, new boss, nothing changes. Not yet, anyway. Stubbornly low wages helps explain why President Trump's message of American economic carnage resonates with his base, and why it's so important that his supporters see that he's doing something to get the raises he promised. Trump had said on the circuit he believes wages will start going up 3 times during his recent rally on Tuesday in Arizona. We now have the lowest unemployment rate we've had in 17 years, according to Mr. Trump. So you're going to see wages go up. But it's not so simple, is it? Economists are stumped at how unemployment can be so low, 4.3% nationally. You can't make that stuff up, can you? I don't know how 102 million being out of work equates to 4.3% of population of 330 to 360 million. Dear me, them and their figures. So many CEOs complain they can't get enough good workers, yet wages are barely rising. Some blame robots and overseas outsourcing for keeping wages low, and others say the labour market isn't really as tight as it appears, since many Americans in their prime working years have given up looking for jobs because there is none. That's why. So the median household income, a good gauge of middle class pay, or the illusion of middle class, peaked in 1999 under Bill Clinton, and nearly 2 decades since, households have seen their modest gains eaten away by inflation. Exactly. The reality is the key to it, of that particular report, is where it says outsourcing to keep wages low. Of course, the cabal and the powers that be knew all along that around the 2013 mark, well, exactly 2013, that the economic shift would move to the east. The Federal Reserve had controlled the financial situation from 1913 on a 100-year contract. So this is why they've been moving all the manufacturing and all the other stuff, all the banks and the businesses, to the east. What happens then is they collapse the Western world altogether, so that people will accept no conditions, no benefits. I'm just glad to have a job, and the wages are kept ridiculously low. In other words, they're trying to turn the Western world into a third world sweatshop. That's the plan. And then what happens is they flood those particular areas with refugees, making the economy stall even further. Less jobs, because there's too many people in the one area. Not enough businesses, because they've all been shipped abroad. But it's backfiring on them now. And we'll hear more about that later in the show. Another report out by Career Builder Research this week has stated that 3/4 of workers, well, just over 3/4, 78%, are living paycheck to paycheck to make ends meet. That's up from 75% last year, and a trait more common in women than men, 81% versus 75%. And 38% of employees said they sometimes live paycheck to paycheck, 17% said they usually do, and 23% said they always do. So, but then you think having a higher salary would take you out of that bracket. But there's always the more you have, the more you spend. Live to your means, as they say, or perhaps not, but that's probably part of the problem. People are living to their means, and then the economy crashes every 7 years, without fail, except this one didn't end. And it's not going to end until the clowns are finished. So even having a higher salary doesn't necessarily mean no more money woes. Nearly 1 in 10 making $100,000 or more are saying they usually or always live paycheck to paycheck. 59% in that income bracket are in debt. And that's for that very reason. They think things are going well, I'm earning a lot of money, and so I'll go and buy that house. That's an extra 100, 200,000, because I'll always have that salary. But history will tell you it's always boom and bust. Always. And that's why so many in that range are struggling. 28% of workers making 50 to 100,000 usually or always live paycheck to paycheck, and 70% are in debt. Again, even the lower end. 51% of those making less than 50,000 a year usually or always live paycheck to paycheck to make ends meet, and 73% of those people are in debt. That's because they end up competing with the ones with money. This is why I've spoken about consumerism and stop competing with people. All it's doing is putting us in debt, which is what they're trying to achieve. Not surprisingly, are the problems even worse for minimum wage workers, 54% of whom say they have to work more than one job just to cover their monthly expenditures. The majority of workers, 81%, have worked a minimum wage job, and 71% of them were not able to make ends meet financially during that time. So more than 54% had to work more than one job. For the older listeners, remember that when there was only one person in the family that worked, and it provided for, generally it was the male, that provided for him and his wife and the children, and it was generally enough. Now we've got both parents working and the elder children working and still not making ends meet. Something's not right, is it? So to alleviate some financial burden, 83% of employers that are hiring minimum wage workers this year will be raising the minimum wage at their organisation. Meanwhile, 7% of households say they can't afford to save even $100 a month. Less than a third of workers 32% stick to a clearly defined budget, and a slight majority, 56%, save 100 or less a month. Those who save nothing is 26%, less than $50 a month, 15%. 50 to 100 is 16%, 100 to 250, 14%, 250 to 500, 11%, 500 to 750, 5%, and 750 to 1,000, 4%. Now here's the surprising figure. Those who save more than 1%, 1,000 a month, is 10%. And we all thought it was 1. It will change once the programs are ended and their financial control is shut down. We can't carry on in this greed society, and that applies to us also. Do we really need the latest iPad or iPhone? Does the one you have still work? Why go and waste money on another one? And we also really need to start campaigning against certain companies that are producing electrical items that have a cut-off date, usually the day after the warranty, unless you extend the warranty, and then it's a day after that one. Yeah, I see it often with the job that I do. Little tiny bits that break off, where if they put a more solid item, it wouldn't break at all. But then that's not what they want, is it? They want you to buy new washing machines and new dryers and new TVs every 2 or 3 years. It's just a waste and another debt increase. So we've had those violent protests, in inverted commas, in Charlottesville, but there's also some fun and games going on in Berkeley in California. The protests referred to as a series of violent protests and clashes between organised groups that occurred in the city of Berkeley, California, and this is in the vicinity of the University California campus. Violence has occurred predominantly. This is a news item report. Just listen to this list. It amused me just for the list. So the violence occurred predominantly between anti-Trump protesters, some of whom are anarchists, anti-fascists, far-left radicals, alternative right radicals, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and other supporters of Donald Trump. Do you understand half of that? What is a far-left radical and an alternative right radical? Most people don't know what left and right is, particularly politically. Some of them don't know what left and right is, full stop. It's like some of the clowns in the five-sided building, for one. What you people have got to realise is all these are paid actors. All of them. And they're all wearing various labels like a badge of honour. Sound familiar? Yes, same as the clowns. Don't fall for that type of rubbish, because that's their attempt to get the public to start rioting so they can implement martial law. It's their only way out now. Don't fall for it, and please don't put yourself as a label. I'm on the left or I'm on the right of politics. I'm neither, because it's all bollocks, all of it. It's nothing to do with we the people. Never has done. Kind of singing to the choir for the majority of our group, but for those of you who are new to the show, if you're involving yourself in politics, you're literally wasting your energy. American Civil Liberties Union are now deciding that they're going to sue Mr. Trump. Seems to be he's going to spend half of his time in the courtroom. He's sued for this and sued for that. It's funny how Mr. Bush wasn't sued for anything, or Obama. I find that rather odd, but suddenly people all decide to come forward and sue. Oh well. So they're going to sue Mr. Trump over his decision to ban transgender people from serving in the military. The ACLU made the announcement, we're talking to the real Donald Trump, interesting terminology, to court to challenge the unconstitutional transgender military ban. Trump, in a memo last Friday, directed the Department of Defense to stop accepting transgender people who enlist for military service. What happens if they don't admit it? Oh well, maybe that hasn't been thought of. He had earlier announced his plans to ban transgender people from all the armed forces, and Trump said he had consulted with generals and military experts and decided that the United States government will not allow or accept transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the US military. Trump went on, our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened by the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Personally, I agree with that statement, because it becomes a side issue, a distraction. But could not one argue the same applies of having females in the military? Because in essence that's even more of a distraction. Not denigrating women's abilities in any way, but all I was saying is if that's the criteria, that it becomes a distraction, then there's none more distracting than a female, both in terms of the sexual nature and also in terms of the male role as dictated in society, that they must protect the female at all costs. Yes, a lot of that chivalry is gone now, sadly, but then that's part of the agenda of the programs, where females are taught to stand up for themselves. But there's still a lot of men who are chivalrous and will spend more time looking out for the female in their troop rather than focusing on the task ahead. Getting in very dangerous waters there with that particular ruling. I'm quite honest, I don't think it really should be a point of discussion. Yet again, it's another. There's so many more important things to be focused on than that. But on you go. And here's something that's the perfect setup, so you will know and watch for it. Last Monday is 54 years after Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous speech, "I Have a Dream," and less than a month after a counter-protester was killed following a demonstration by alleged white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia, a statue of the legendary civil rights leader will be unveiled outside the Georgia state capitol in King's hometown of Atlanta. You all know what's coming next. In principle, it's fine, but you know full well they're going to use that for an agenda. On hopes the black people and the stupid whites who think that we should all be divided don't fall for it again. Just don't. There's been talks in Europe this week, and one of the things that came up is that they're trying to create an FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, for the EU now. Really? No doubt. Something to do with the NATO clowns. But it suggested it would be very incredibly difficult to realise, given the distrust between the intelligence agencies. Yeah, right, pull the other one. You know, for people who don't know, the CIA, MI6, which is the British International, MI5 is the home one, Mossad and the KGB have been working together since year one. All of them. And yet they have the illusion that they're not. They are. But then maybe the politicians aren't aware. There's that to it as well. There's a person called Annie Macon said vastly different legal systems and history would make it difficult given the so-called distrust between intelligence agencies. Now, Miss Macon is a former MI5 intelligence officer, and the increased threat of terrorism in Europe has been blamed on the influx of migrants. Yeah, right. So EU politicians have come up with a plan to deal with it. Really? Problem, reaction, solution, anyone? The President of the European Parliament, Antonio Tajani, wants to establish a domestic intelligence service similar to America's FBI within the bloc to fight terrorism. He emphasised that member states must cooperate much more. In other words, they must hand over a portion of their GDP. Again, sound familiar? And but Annie Macon of MI5 suggests that it won't. It's more of a vanity project which won't work. Well, intelligence has to be applied, not just a name. How many times is there an event in Britain, France, Spain, Germany, America, where they put up a name of the alleged perpetrator, and the next line in virtually every single event was known to the intelligence community or was under investigation by the intelligence community? Do people not wonder why they never caught any of them before the event? Maybe they were assets to begin with. Now here's some more utter bullshittery. It's now alleged Pyongyang has launched a missile which, according to Japanese cabal and South Korea cabal, passed through northern Japan's airspace. The Japanese government activated its J-alert warning system after North Korea allegedly fired an unidentified missile early Tuesday morning, and the alleged North Korean missile passed over Japanese territory around 6:06 local time. The Japanese military did not attempt to shoot down the missile, but warned people to take precautions. Yeah, right. The Japanese government announced the missile fell into the Pacific Ocean just 14 minutes after the launch, some 1,180 kilometers east of Hokkaido Cape Edamo, the Japan Times reports. Japan's atomic facilities suffered no damage, its nuclear regulation authority mentioned, and no damage has been reported to ships or aircraft in the region as the missile broke off into 3 pieces before falling into the water. This is more fear porn. It just is. Word of warning was basically the Japan Times that announced that news story that went round the world. So I did some digging. Checking. Right, okay. And Japan Times was sold to a public relations firm. In other words, propaganda, called News 2 Holdings. You know, why would a newspaper be ran by a public relations firm unless it's driving agenda? So I'm sure the core ethics of journalism will be on hand to make sure the ship steers a true course all the way to the bank, it seems. The UN, which one, is treating Israel unfairly by diminishing its ties to Jerusalem and not doing enough to curb arms deliveries to Hezbollah, according to Israel's Prime Minister Nutty Arsehole. He complained to the visiting UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Monday. Mr. Netanyahu lashed out at the UN in the presence of Guterres, who is in the Middle East to try and facilitate the resumption of peace talks between Israel and Palestine. Yeah. The minute that anybody offers up peace talks between Israel and Palestine, Mr. Nutty Arsehole and his band of thugs decides to distract and derail it. Coming soon, Iran or Hezbollah or a Palestinian rocket into a market in Israel. You watch. Beggars belief. So, Mr. Nutty Arsehole said the United Nations treats Israel unfairly and absurdly denies Jewish connections to Jerusalem, which Israel claims as its capital, while the UN views East Jerusalem as Palestinian territory which Israel occupied illegally under international law. Mr. Netanyahu's other complaint to the UN that it was not keeping Palestinian hate speech against Israel in check, really. They're smashing all the homes down and wiping all the food and cutting them off from clean water. And he wonders why their people are spouting hate speech. And he also blamed the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon for being too soft on the Iranian-backed Hezbollah movement, which is seeking the destruction of the Jewish state, according to the Israeli Prime Minister. We had a guest on Sunday, Randy Dupre, on the feedback on was rather good of what was stated in that show. But Randy also mentioned about Lebanon as well, 1983. Who did he say that was controlling that region at the same time? Israel. So you want to know who set up Hezbollah? There you have it. Again, it's all part of the illusion. The sleight of hand blame X, Y and Z while A hides. More Jewish news. A group of 43 senators who obviously have nothing better to do, 29 Republicans and 14 Democrats, not that it makes any blind bit of difference, they're all the same, apparently wants to implement a law that would make it a felony for Americans to support the international boycott against Israel, which was launched in protest of that country's decades-old occupation of Palestine. Now, the two primary sponsors of the bill are Democratic Ben Cardin of Maryland, go figure, and Republican Rob Portman of Ohio. Perhaps the most shocking aspect is the alleged punishment they're putting forward. Anyone guilty of violating the prohibitions will face a minimum civil penalty of $250,000 and a maximum criminal penalty of $1 million and 20 years in prison. Anyone want to say fascist? The so-called people who were trampled on by the fascists implementing the same programs. So the proposed measure, called the Israel Anti-Boycott Act S.720, was introduced by Cardin on March the 21st, and the Jewish Telegraphic Agency reports that the bill was drafted with the assistance of, go figure, AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Number of things come up with that. How is it that we have people in our government that are more interested in a rather tiny country, which is smaller than many of the states in this country, 6,000-7,000 miles away, than the people who pay their wages? How is it we have agencies and groups dedicated to a country 7,000 miles away, but not dedicated to the people in the country? Do we have an American Muslim Public Affairs Committee, or an American China Public Affairs Committee, or an American North Korea? Why is it always Israel? See, to me, those 43 senators should be sacked on the spot, because, like I said with the previous one, we've got far more pressing things than preventing people criticising Israel, and they're wasting public taxpayers' money on this kind of propaganda drivel that has no relevance whatsoever. And this will be the last of the news item before the music break, and this is in light of a report that the Pentagon is having 65 billion cut in its funding. Can't say I argue with that. I would leave them with 65 billion. It was up to me, but thankfully maybe not. It's not, it's not up to me. But the other issue that's come up as well is foreign aid. And there's been 5.7 billion requested for foreign aid for 2017. Didn't we say charity begins at home? Oh well, perhaps it don't. So of the 5.7 billion, it's no surprise that 3.1 billion of it is going to which country? You guessed it again, Israel. $1.3 billion for Egypt, 350 million for Jordan, and they are the three largest recipients. The amount of 950 million that was left was divided up amongst various other nations, such as 150 million for Iraq, which I thought we were still at war with, and 12.7 million for Moldova, which we have no idea, and 45 million for Tunisia. Beggars belief. So, in light of all that, here's something that may pique a lot of people's interest. A bipartisan group of lawmakers are supporting a new act called Audit the Pentagon Act of 2017 that would require the Department of Defense to obtain an audit or face a budget reduction of 0.5%. How about 50%? Or how about 99%? 0.5%. Anyway, Congress has fully given the Pentagon a blank check with no oversight or accountability, said Barbara Lee, who's the senator for California, during a press conference outside the Capitol on Tuesday. She went on, "It's simple. If the Pentagon can't account for how they are spending taxpayer money, then they should not have a blank check from Congress." The question remains, what have Congress been doing to ensure that they're not wasting funds? Apparently nothing. So she carried on and says, let's bring some common sense. Ooh, they do have some there. To the Pentagon and its $500 billion budget. $500 billion budget a year. That's more than the GDP of some nations. In fact, a lot of nations. And we're spending it on war. Republican Mike Burgess of Texas, who is sponsoring the audit bill with Lee, said protecting America's national security should never be subjected to partisanship. Correct. Congress has allowed the Department of Defense to get away with 26 years of non-compliance of the Chief Financial Officers Act. The Department of Defense is the only agency that has not undergone a full audit. In fact, it's not even demonstrated when it would be auditable. Oh, there'll be some red herrings if the Pentagon and the Department of Defense audit ever came out. $450 for toilet seats, and you've no idea. That would be one of the most interesting WikiLeaks reveal if ever there was an audit of the Pentagon. Well, not necessarily the Pentagon, but the Department of Defense. Right, that's the news. Some of it okay, some of it depressing, and some of it utterly bizarre, if you ask me. And some of it to watch out for, particularly in Georgia around the statue of Martin Luther King. As you can bet your bottom dollar, the script writers are planning something for that. Right, we'll be back in the second hour with some intel and some op-ed pieces. And where are we? Let's try this. Hi all, and welcome back to the second hour. That first song was called Kingdom. Of course, we had a big show recently, Kingdom of Manor, and covered many aspects of what's going on around the world and how we're doing our part to bring this cabal to an end. And then the second one, Keep the Faith. I know everyone's getting tired. Everyone's tired. But there's one line in that song: never let your love turn into hate. That's energy sapping. And our energies are sapped enough with all the bullshittery that's going on. There's a whole raft of things ongoing at the moment, you know, apart from what's in the news. The frequencies are changing. The two worlds are splitting more and more. The 4-year loop is ramping up even more because all the fear porn that was out in 2013 is all back again. This is going to happen, that's going to happen, viruses and zombies and Nibiru, and the list goes on and on. I think most of our members now see through it because we're on a better path. We've now learned to not go down the side streets that many in the alternative community have pushed you down, with blue avians and blue chicken cults and all that rubbish, and a whole heap of others whose list gets longer by the week. Of course, Teal Swan was the latest to be outed. Lisa Renee will follow. These people may talk a good game, but there's a hidden hook behind all of the narrative. And this is the problem. They'll tell you portions of what they want, what they know you want to hear. Love and light, and let's all have unity, and all this and that. But there's always the hidden agenda that they're paid to deliver. And of course, a lot of people think, I've mentioned this recently, that the New Age started in the 60s and 70s, you know, with ascended masters and angels and archangels and love and light, and let's all dance around with some stones and think we're all going to be magically transported to 4 or 5D. But that was a program developed as far back as the late 1800s. A bit like Albert Pike, same time frame, late 1800s, and his World War III prophecy, which means plan. Whenever you hear the term prophecy, it means it's a written plan into the narrative. In all the so-called religious books, they're not prophecies at all. They're forward plans. So as Mr. Pike planned with his cronies for World War III of the clash of the civilizations between the Muslims and the Christians, which is currently what they're trying to push now, it's not working. It didn't work in 1980, it didn't work in the 90s, it didn't work in the 2000s, and it's not working in this decade either. But 1980 was when they were going to roll out the Third World War, initially. Late 70s, 1980. And around the same time as Albert Pike was prophesying all these three world wars, you had people like Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner. I brought that up last week because it's a point of concern. I'm seeing patterns in the alternative media of those type of people involved in the alternative media. I'm not too sure whether they're legitimate or they're not. I suspect some of them aren't. It may turn out all of them aren't. But this is the latest where they add groups in that appears to be spiritual and new age and all love and light again, and all about how we should live off the land, when it has a massive occultic hidden hook. Now, I've received, thanks to one of the members, a fairly extensive document detailing the Waldorf schools, because that's where this new age originally came from, that the Teal Swans and the Lisa Renees are spouting utter bullshit from, and the channeling. That's where it stemmed from. Blavatsky was New Age 1.0. Steiner took it up and then created the Waldorf schools, where they're teaching the kids different things, and on the face of it, it looks rather cool. But when they're telling the teachers that they must be touchy-feely with the kids, and they must instruct their children to distance themselves from the parents and have the new parent as the teacher, then you see where it's going. Sounds very like the Svarley material, doesn't it? From an overview point of view, where they distance the child from the parents, and only brought one parent in to apply torture to the child. But it was always to the trainer. It's the same thing. Now suddenly we've got 3 people who have inserted themselves into the alternative media that came from Waldorf schools. If I get time, I will condense the narrative that I've been given this week, and I may do a special on it, because it's important that people look out for it and see it for what it is. There's a lot of sexual stuff going on with the kids in those schools. There's a lot of violence, bullying, and the very fact they're telling teachers that they must be touchy-feely with the children, it's part of the bonding, is, to me, is procurement. Right, some intel. Well, this is from Anna von Reitz, this first. I'll put it in because it came out earlier in the week. And some of it's correct, it's just the timing bit is not. And she wrote, Rothschilds is dumping American assets this morning, which was yesterday I think, if memory serves me correctly, because he realises that the titles he claims to own to all of these assets are based on fraud and are worthless, but he's trying to sell them anyway. I've never seen a more flagrant example of bad faith since the Florida real estate swindles, which is still going on. The banks have been involved in a multi-generational fraud scheme in which they have created, bought and sold interests in property which they have no valid interest. Pure and simple, they don't have a valid interest in anything they are selling. They are selling the equivalent to quit claims to property they don't own. Those US assets belong to and have been claimed back by the American states and the people. All secondary creditors, including the Rothschilds, are out of luck. You're going to hear a lot of that term, secondary creditors. They're not primary creditors. All the funds and the assets belong to the people. So she was mentioning Rothschild was dumping assets. Well, actually he did that last December after he raided the American US Inc. government account. Emptied it. So for the last 9-10 months we've been running on credit and people's pensions, because they've emptied that as well. They've now emptied the banks, as reported in a recent show, and they're basing keeping going on a credit-based system on the off chance the RV revaluation takes place. Except it won't. And this is why the fun and games in Houston, which I'll get into shortly, is part of it. But Rothschild thinks he owns the whole of District of Columbia. The reality is he owns nothing. They own nothing. All of it was used by stolen funds from the trust accounts, and all of it has to be paid back. Right. So what have the Rothschilds been up to this week? Well, here we go. They've been threatening banks that to not support any new system that's currently being implemented. I don't want to go too much into that, but you'll know I've mentioned it previously. But unbeknown to the Rothschilds, the whole episode of who they were threatening and which banks they were threatening was recorded. And the whole recordings have been sent to all agencies and also the Pentagon. Now, methinks it's about time they finally acted on it and dealt with it. They surely, well, the Pentagon know. The Pentagon are now being told 3 times by the bogus Chinese elders that they don't have the assets to pull off the RV. And people will go, well, they've got loads of assets and they own this and they own that. Except they're all bankrupt. People have a hard time believing that they have nothing left. And to the degree I understand that, because you're getting news largely from people who don't understand what's going on in the background. And I do get that. And there's a lot being published in the news. Some still listen to the news. I do it myself occasionally, even though it's bullshit. You just know it is. But they only had all those assets and funded all the cabal, which cost vast quantities of money. And then suddenly in 2007 the trust account was closed for the final time until they're finished. So you want to know why 2008 and the depression, which is ongoing, is because they couldn't keep taking money, the public's money, out of the trust account. So they had a single pot of money left, and all it's been doing for the last 9-10 years is swirling around. They can't go and fund big projects, because to do the big projects they used to go and loan off the trust, except they've never paid any of them back because they think that they owned it. Now they have to pay it back. So all their fancy projects and agenda this and agenda that and war for this and war for that is gone, because it was the trust account that always funded it. So the Rothschilds bought up, and the others bought up a whole heap of public assets using our trust account. Well, like I said, that's now finished. The trust accounts will not be opened until those clowns step down or are removed, one way or the other. Simple as that. Now, more good news is, like I just said earlier, the Rothschilds' empire cost an awful lot of money to keep going in the higher echelons as they were. Lots of mercenaries to pay, CNN, Clinton News Network to pay. The Rothschilds paid Ted Turner, except they haven't paid them for months, from what I gather. So there's a lot of people now that are owed substantial amounts of money from the Rothschilds, including some of our military clowns who are standing there with their bucket loads of dinars waiting to be paid out, because the Rothschilds are in with the Asian faction, aka Chinese elders, aka bogus dragon groups that have no assets. So these people are now starting to come forward. The people who have had cabal members who have had their money stolen off them by the Rothschilds. And what that's now creating, or will help us, is we'll have less resistance for those of us trying to fix things. All those people all supported the Rothschilds like they're some sort of god. Now they're all seeing them for what they really are: vampiric parasites. And what it also does is it now adds to what is an ever expanding group willing to end the old system of control and make the changes. So basically now people who formerly worked with the Rothschilds are all now jumping ship and coming to help. Now some people will find that uncomfortable. They're still cabal Thomas, and I do understand that. But I'll say two things. In the series 100, I've repeated this a number of times, when they were all fighting, and the two leaders, one said to the other, Clark said to the other native leader, where are all the good guys? And the answer is, there is none. The bad guys in the dark have been in control for so long that the good guys were never allowed to flourish. The needle in the haystack. Yes, there might be many people who are awake, but how many have the ability to facilitate the change or be the change? it's even less. But isn't it a sense of the ironic that the dark bring in the light? Or some of them anyway. We have learnt so much from these people stepping down on the way forward. They've told us the tricks of the trade that was knowledge that's been hidden to us for many thousands of years. So the fact that those people are now stepping out is a massive bonus for us. It will escalate as more and more people step out. More and more will get the courage to go, you know what, I can't continue with this. And again, I'll refer to the Sparley show. A lot of these people had no option. They've been brainwashed whilst they were in the mother's womb. The Sparley show told you that. You think along their lives that their consciences are not pricked. I wish I hadn't. Yes, I've got all this wealth and this and that, but what have I done with my life? Trampled all over people, killed people. Is that what I'm about? And this is where the masks of illusion comes in. But like I said, I warned would happen last year. They're all starting to drop. It doesn't matter who you are. Light, dark, neutral. The masks of illusion are starting to drop. So, next news item, Intel item. There's been a complete lockdown on digital currency, and the reason for that is that's another of the clowns' plans being foiled. So that's the issue that's going on with the digital currency. Another plot by them. Again, it failed. This week I've mentioned this a long time ago, and in their desperation they're wielding out some of the really old financial platforms, and this particular one is called Hercules, and to try and circumnavigate around the current system, which is a lot more transparent. It's not fully operational yet, but there's sufficient in it that shows some of the transactions that they don't want you to see. And so they've been trying to cut this new platform off and implement the old platform. They had Babylon 1, 2, 3 and 4, if memory serves me correctly, and they all failed. Well, the Hercules platform failed also. And so what they're going to be trying tomorrow is a new platform called the Apollo platform. Quite what Apollo and the Oracle make of that remains to be seen. But that's being rolled out tomorrow, and I will tell you by the weekend that will fail also. It's not gonna work, period. What's been going on in the government? Well, behind the scenes again. I know some of you love that term, or not, but it is ongoing. A raft of disclosure has been filtering down even to the lower levels of government, even some of the secretaries. So it's not just the president who's being given disclosure now, it's filtering right through the government, and currently it's having a rather huge impact in many ways. Earlier this week, and this is why they're trying to implement the old platforms called Hercules and Apollo, is the cabal have now been told that their licenses to the interbanking system has now expired. Oops. they won't be renewed. And so now they no longer have any access to it. None whatsoever. So then we get the petulance. And the petulance is going to ramp up exponentially over the coming weeks and months. Because now they're cut off from everything. And yes, Hurricane Harvey was geoengineered. Yet again, harmless storm developed into a major storm. It wasn't as bad as the clowns on the Weather Channel were making out. It just wasn't. I had a piece on them, but unfortunately I went to cut and paste it and then I forgot. But it went from category into category 1 and quickly to category 4, even though it was 130 is not category 4, it's only 3. Still bad enough regardless. But work was done on it and reduced it from a 4 to a 1, category 1, or a high-end 3 to a category 1, and that should have been the end of it, except it appears they now have new machines. So work will start on them, and they'll be shut down also. There's a lot of things being shut down currently. Now, one of our members, Guy Boyd, called it right. It was in part to do with collecting more money from fuel, and largely that has failed. Yes, some prices have gone up, but that is largely to do with price gouging rather than any policy. Now, we seem to forget, or they think we all have no memories, but America reported recently that they have one of the largest oil surpluses ever on record. So unless they sold that to the Chinese as well and leased it back like the military hardware, it's still there. See, this is where the manipulation comes in, because we had a massive, or we not had, have a massive surplus of oil because nobody's buying it anymore. Less miles are being driven because there's less jobs, less manufacturing, less oil. So even for argument's sake, the whole of Houston oil field is shut down. It would take a couple of months at least to dwindle the surplus. So why is there suddenly a supply and let's increase prices less than 24 hours after the event, or even before the event they were mentioned on it? Then you realise it's an agenda. Well, thankfully a lot of our members are thinking in those terms. But there's a lot of people around the world who don't believe we don't have the capabilities to manipulate weather. Wrong again. The first US patent for cloud seeding for rain purposes was developed in 1891. Not 1991, 1891. So they could do it then. Can you imagine what they've developed now? Now, the other more important issue that the distraction and event has been engineered for is to do with, partly to do with the intel, the financial, and the ongoing issue of America being completely bankrupt, and we are. And what's reared its ugly head this week, they're talking about increasing the debt ceiling. That's the only way they can get money supply. But the debt ceiling, and they're talking about a 60 billion increase, is not just for the damages for the you know it, and we know it. So that's what the clowns are wanting to do, because the military is bankrupt. The leasing back from China's not worked, because they thought the RV was going to happen every Drake time, 2 weeks, and it failed every 2 weeks. It's not happening. So one hopes that the idiots in Congress and the others that vote on any debt ceiling reject it out of hand. Yes, it might get a bit ugly in this country, as things will be short. There may be a possibility of shortages, but every effort is being made to negate that. Do I think it will happen? No. But we may go rather close to the wire before the psychopaths are dealt with. Now, this particular event in Houston, and it's still ongoing, there was another staged weather event known as Hurricane Sandy, which is a hook in more ways than one, as you know. And during that event, the New York Stock Exchange flooded, and this is where all the bonds, all those legendary bonds, and the birth certificates were kept. And they increased the debt ceiling then. And what did they do to it? They went to war with it. And this is what they're planning again. But I expect it to fail. There's too many inside the government now who have had enough and know the truth. And basically the increase in the debt ceiling is purely to keep the illusion going. That's all it is, an illusion. Because it'll just kick the can down the road. That's basically what America's been doing, kicking the can down the road for the last 10 years, waiting for the Chinese elders to deliver the RV. All this illusion. America is thriving, it has full employment capacity, we're the best at this and the best at that. But back in the real world, this country has been stripped of everything, leveraged, black budgeted, offshore accounts, emptied pensions, rogue foundations, 19 billion collected for Haiti. They've built 6 houses in 5 years. Those people are not going back. Too many minerals in Haiti, you see. Maybe we'll find minerals on the outskirts of Houston. Wouldn't surprise me. Again, it's whilst it's rather awful for the people, it's a staggering sign of their sheer desperation and the lengths they will go just to keep going. Because even if they add 60 billion to the debt ceiling, that'll vanish overnight. It doesn't go very far. And of course the other aspect, and I'm going to see a lot more of this, so you've been warned ahead of time, is charity organisations. Who purportedly are there to help the people. Yeah, right. Pull the other one that's got balls on. Houston Disaster Funds. unless you know the people directly, don't give a single cent to it, because it's going into the same accounts that have been raping us left, right and centre. That's what it's all about. Keeping their accounts liquid. You're going to see the ATMs shut down altogether, the way things are going. There's nothing left, and all they're doing is collecting more and more money out of the pot that the people have. What happens if they turn around one day and say, well, we've collected all the cash now, we're going to go digital? Here's your new identity cards, here's your microchip to access it. This is the way these people think. And we always have to be one step ahead of them. So yes, they may feel sorry for the people, and I do generally feel sorry for all the people who are struggling, who've lost homes, lost their lives. But I'm hoping when the shock of what's happened to those people, when they realise it was a deliberate engineered event, that these people might come and join us and end this nonsense once and for all. So what they're going to do now is they'll collect that money, and you'll find vast swathes of Houston in 5 years' time. If this continues in 5 years' time, it won't. Like Katrina. When was Katrina? 11 years ago? Of all the people back in after Katrina? No. And the people of Houston and that whole region best get used to the realities. They're not going back. Of course, you remember a lot of the people that were evacuated from Katrina all went to one particular place. Yeah. The same one they just rain bombed, Houston. Well, too many there. Let's get rid of a few, or a whole heap of them. Again, it's not fair, but this is how these people think. Lots of people that were evacuated after Katrina all got left in Houston because there was nowhere to go. They certainly haven't gone back to where all the levees were deliberately taken down. So you're going to find they're going to keep engineering these events like Barcelona, like the London Bridge, because people are so gullible and they'll just hand money over. You know, they'll just hand money over and they'll keep collecting, regardless of whether the event's real or not. Until we, the people, realise it's all a sham and a scam. But basically the gist of it, they've milked everything and they have nothing left, and it's time we really realise that and shut off the bullshit disaster events and call it out for what it is. And as for those clowns on the Weather Channel, those people are traitors to this country, because if you're any sort of meteorologist, you would see that that was not real and call it out, not let people drown and have their homes turfed out. Those people on the Weather Channel are traitors to this country, all of them. Right, where do we go next? some op-ed pieces that Intel took a lot longer than I thought. I pulled up 4 things that's prevalent. It's prevalent to the alternative community, and it's also prevalent in a wider world that needs to be dealt with. And it's the first one is narcissism is the pursuit of gratification from vanity or egotistic admiration of one's own attributes. We could name a number of people in the alternative media with that. Now, the term originated from Greek mythology, where the young narcissus fell in love with his own image reflected in a pool of water. That type of behaviour has to stop. Again, with the masks coming down, that type of behaviour is going to become more prevalent and in your face, and they'll be exposed for it. And whilst this is rather similar, it is a different term and not related necessarily to narcissism. Is egocentrism, which is the ability to differentiate between self and other. Again, that type of behaviour is not going to be valid going forward. And then 2 others. Religiocentrism is defined as the conviction that a person's own religion is more important or superior to other religions. Again, it's divide and conquer. And the final one, ethnocentrism, is judging another culture solely by the values and standards of one's own culture. Ethnocentric individuals judge other groups relative to their own ethnic group or culture, especially with concern for language, behaviour, customs and religion. Those 4 traits have no value going forward on an individual level or collective, and it's something that has to be dealt with on a personal level for the first 2, technically a personal level on the 3rd one, the religiocentrism. What happens if you find out your own religion is total BS? Oops. And judging somebody else's culture solely by the values and standards of our own, again, is wrong. Remember we had this discussion in Cosmic Voice. You know, cultures are defined by the control system. You know, they're destroying American values or British values or the British culture, forgetting it was created by the same people who are creating the divide and conquer. This is the label system again, and labels are there to create rivalry, to create divide and conquer. Where are we going next? There's been a couple of videos this week. I haven't been able to listen to all of it, but there was one particular video, I think it was Laura Leon, and she was talking about how everything's inverted, and we've covered some aspects of this in previous shows. Everything's backwards, everything's upside down. And then she was talking about the whole universe being inverted in some way. And then I looked at the term universe, which means one verse. Uni is one, verse is story. And then I looked at it again, and I come back with the term U-inverse. Is there a reason why it's called universe? Or is it U-inverse? Time will tell. This could be some more of their word magic. And there's been chatter about clones. What you're going to start seeing, which may be a shock to some people, is you're going to start seeing them phase out right in front of you. That may lead to some rather extraordinary events on TV. Where have all the clones gone? But what we're experiencing at the moment is we, as people on the planet, are in small pockets in and out of organic and inorganic. So things will appear different. It may only be for a brief second, it may be for a few minutes, it may be for a day. It depends on the area where the field is strong enough to observe. But there's a phasing in and a phasing out going on, and this is going on all levels. A phasing out of the dark and more of the light coming in. A phasing out of the old financial system and a phasing in of the new one. And dare I say it, a phasing out of the lies and a massive phasing in of the truth. And the same thing is playing out currently, where you're going to be experiencing things and not be able to make sense of it. Why do I feel different? Why everything buzzing? Different vibration. Well, it's a different frequency because that's a brief moment in time, a pocket of the organic, and these phasing in and then phasing back out will increase as time, in inverted commas, moves forward. You can't just plonk everyone into organic in one go. It has to be phased in. It's too much of a shock. It's too much to handle the frequencies of it for a lot of people. You know, these waves that have been coming in since 2002 are being harnessed, and there's times where we're struggling with it. Imagine that in one go. So people will start feeling different at different times, and a buzzing and a frequency, and thinking, I don't feel like I'm here. Maybe you're not. It's nothing to worry about. It will have a happy ending. But these phase shifts will start to increase between the inorganic, which we've largely been in, which, well, we have been in, it's not largely, and we're phasing the inorganic out, and you're experiencing for short bursts of time the organic. And what you're also starting to see going forward, you're already seeing it, some of you, but perhaps can't put your finger on it, is the city of light pills that are referred to in the 100 series. Basically the cabal in there, or the ruling elite, decided to give the humans on the planet a pill, or a disc, or a chip, which basically took all the pain and trauma away. And humanity in the past took that pill. And a reason why we're experiencing a lot of trauma and pain now, apart from when you're pulling it out doing your shadow work, is the memories of that time is coming back. Because the city of light pills are inorganic. You need to experience pain and trauma so you know how to avoid it going forward. You can deal with things easier. If you keep brushing things off and brushing it under the carpet's going to be up to the ceiling. That's basically what humanity has done over a long period of time. I don't want to look at this. We've all heard it. Yeah, well, you can talk to me about the governments being not nice and some of the banks, but don't talk to me about pedophiles. I don't want to hear it until it happens to their child. Then they're screaming their head off. Someone will have to do something about this. Well, what about when Johnny down the road was being interfered with? You told me you didn't want to hear it. So the city of light pills are wearing off rapidly. This will bring down the masks of illusion, and the past memories are now returning. They're returning not now, although it is perceived as being now. I'll repeat that again. Past memories are returning, not now, of the now, although perceived as being now. There is any coincidence that the pills given in the City of Light in the 100 series are the same shape as the pole of Saturn? Maybe they were one and the same. For those of you unaware of that, go and read Chloe's documents, Saturn Moon Matrix. That's not operating anymore either. So there's something to ponder. May not be correct, but it could be, given the times that are happening now. What if Bluebeam, as in Project Bluebeam, was an event to remind you of past wars? Think about that one. Now, a few things that's come up with people that are close to me. I'm close to all the members. You know, I do care about all of you. That's why I'm involved in this. But some people come to me with different issues and different problems, and my opinion on this and my opinion on that. And some people are kind of struggling at the moment because their loved ones or partners won't wake up. And this show has always been about the all. It always has been. But I said in last November it was time to let them go their own path, because it's too late to help them. You're not going to be able to educate them in the short time we have left. You're just not. It's too much. They have to go through it their own way. They chose to ignore all the markers of when to wake up and just lived in their own bubble. But one thing the people that listen to this show, I can tell you, is you are only responsible for you. You're not responsible for anybody else, for their behaviour, for their not waking up. And I'm asking you to let go of the guilt that you feel because you've got partners who won't wake up. That's unfair on yourself. Who gave you the contract to be the personal waker-upper? You're just not responsible for the folly of others, and who in reality may or not be real to begin with. Again, we've covered that, organic and inorganic. Now, I know some will struggle with that concept. It's not an easy one to adapt to. But this whole construct we've been stuck in is a complete mindfuck of epic proportions. Pardon my French. You know, we've gone from beings who travelled among the stars with no bodies to feed, pee or poop with, no illness or injury, to these meat suits. It's for a lot that listen to this show, that's an epic downgrade. Now, there's many who listen to this show who are not from here. They came in to end this system. That's their only goal. So how are you responsible for other people waking up? You can only be responsible to yourself. Now, there was a post this week by one of the members highlighted her worry and guilt as someone close refused to wake up. Well, she wanted to continue with it, but felt like she was abandoning that person. My answer to that is no, no, and no. And let's call it as it is. They have abandoned us, not the other way round. All of us have been cast aside as a group of freaks, lunatics, mentally deranged, troublemakers, and the classic conspiracy theorist, which is a complete misnomer in and of itself. If you look at the etymology or the wording of it, conspiracy, a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. Are we planning anything unlawful or harmful? No. We're exposing the group who did. And a theorist, a person who deals mainly with the theory of a subject. So a conspiracy theorist is a person who deals with the theory of a subject about a secret plan by a group who plan to do something unlawful or harmful. So basically they've described themselves. We're not doing anything unlawful or harmful. We're trying to fix things, tell the truth. So to the person who did that post and to the others who are struggling, do you really think for 1 minute, or do they actually think, the unawakened, for 1 minute, that our lives have been anything but hell upon hell? Not only do we have to absorb the shite that's thrown at us on this planet, that we've all absorbed, including the unawakened, we absorb the trauma and the pain of it by learning the truth behind it. that suddenly there's a group of people and beings who are doing things, heinous things, for some sort of an agenda. That's hell on top of hell. But do they stop for 1 minute and think about how we feel? No. They just carried on rolling their eyes, turning their backs, spitting venom, and casting us aside with, let's be honest, zero compassion. None whatsoever. And yeah, in the times we live in now, it's fantastic for us, for those who've been exposing the lies. Because all the so-called conspiracies are now out in the public eye. All of them. Banking fraud, Vatican, financial, sexual skullduggery, charities, Clinton Foundation. You know, the list goes on and on and on. Mortgage fraud. Chemtrails even. Monsanto. Water fluoridation. You can go on forever. And the vaccines. They've all been exposed out into the public now. So they're no longer conspiracy. It's fact. And the question remains, how much more do they need to see and accept reality? The question also remains, is it purely the case they don't see our world anymore? Think about that. They may not see it. So, I'll ask again, who abandoned who? We never abandoned anybody. We tried our damnedest. We didn't fail. They failed themselves. And for those that still feel guilty, you have to remember this is a soul level choice you have taken to step out of the illusion, virtual reality, the holographic fun and games. This was never a meat suit choice. It just never was. Here's some music. Hi all, and welcome back to the final portion tonight. That was a heavy hour. There's some things in there that can sound disturbing, but the truth is, but there's a lot of positive in that intel, and that's what you've got to hold on to. And I'm pleading with you all to stay calm in this next phase. We're going to be tested. That's why I try to warn ahead of time, not to put people in fear, because I've spent the last 4 years counteracting all the fear bullshittery. I don't know how many different episodes where people say this is happening, and Nibiru's coming, and no, and no. And none of it's took place. But they're backed into a corner. I think people are starting to see that now. We're going to see more of the ATM issues, although they've just been given a large cash injection courtesy of the shenanigans in Houston. They've tried leveraging, but they've got nothing to leverage with anymore. They've tried the RV, It's failed over 1,000 times. The Rothschilds have tried to liquidate stuff that they don't own, and people now who believed them 100% that they owned virtually the whole of the District of Columbia now realise they own Jack. That's a massive sea of change that's taken place, and yet it's largely behind the scenes, but we're seeing enough of it publicly. We've had volumes of disclosure where if you ever doubted yourself of being involved in this truth movement, we've all been validated many times over in the last 12 months alone. So take the positive aspects. Yes, there's some concerning things, but we've prevented most. We can't prevent all. But one of the questions is about using your abilities. I've mentioned a number of times in this show, in Th&I shows, and in Cosmic Voice. I think it was around September time. I ended one show with use your manifest abilities more, because it's a lot more open. Now, telling people that and getting people to believe in it is the problem. Telling people, I can tell all of you listeners, start manifesting, start creating a better world. But do you believe in it? There is people who can mess with storms. The original storm went from category 3, high category 3, down to category 1 in the space of a few hours. This has been replayed many, many times. This is why the US has largely had hardly any landfalls of hurricanes for the last 10 years. But then you've got the clowns on the Weather Channel saying Florida had a hurricane last year. It never. They were standing in the eye with the wind meter on the screen showing 25 miles an hour to 36 miles an hour gusts. That's not hurricane. We get worse than an afternoon storm at 4 o'clock every afternoon in Florida during the summer months. The electricity was still on. The palm trees were hardly moving. Those people were lying through their teeth, and they are traitors to this country and its people. I'd like to see us boycott the Weather Channel altogether. Boycott it. And if you live by one of them, shame them in their own community. Because if they're proper weather people, they will know that that was engineered. They can see on the radar the pulses going into it. You watch your local weather and there's a storm there, you will see a pulse going into the centre of it. Now, if we can see that and we're not weather people who have been allegedly educated in this, why can't they? And why haven't they spoken out instead of catastrophic for an afternoon storm? So when a real catastrophic comes along, people are not prepared. It's just ramping up the fear over and over again. Shut them people down. Turn it off. Like the Clinton News Network. Turn them off. They don't have anything relevant to say. Why waste your energy learning stuff that's bullshit anyway? There's our power. And yes, people have abilities to do what is deemed as extraordinary. It's not a few neos. It's all of you. You've just forgotten. Now, most people keep quiet about their abilities because they come under attack. But there's lots of people around the world who have abilities and recognise so. This was a major concern of the cabal, which is why they set up groups like Project Avalon. They were data mining for the people with abilities, and the super soldier groups and the super soldier conventions, they were testing for the ones who had abilities. That's why I've stayed away from those groups. Simon Parkes and Bill Ryan were collecting data on people who had abilities and passing it to the agencies. They're not the only two either. If you have abilities, and I know there's many in our group who do, you keep quiet. It puts you under the radar and allows you to operate in a manner that doesn't put you under threat or under attack. Yes, it may be fun to say I can do this and I can do that, but it's not much fun when you're coming under attack. People have latent abilities to do a lot of things that they are called impossible. I'm telling you to change that to I'm possible. You just have to believe. People can throw away all the medication and heal themselves once you believe. But we have a problem in this country because our culture, in inverted commas, demands everything in an instant. It has to be instantaneous gratification, as they call it. Things take time. Look at the Illuminati. 1776. Their end goal was 2012. Things take time. So you start with small steps and don't be all wishing to win the lottery, because everyone's doing that. How about working on one part of your body that doesn't work too well and making it better? Maybe you've got a skin complaint, and maybe you've got heart issue. I've witnessed people with abilities cure heart disease with nothing but the thought. I've witnessed it. But they're special. No, they're not actually. They're just ordinary everyday folk who believed. This comes into the Matrix movie. Will he believe? When he believed, it happened. And it's up to you to start believing in yourself, because nobody else will. You're asking people, in essence, we're asking people to believe our truth. But do we believe in ourselves? Do we believe our own truth? Or do we put a mask of illusion up that we're rich, or we're this or we're that, when we're not? So to answer the question, which is one of the questions about abilities, each and every one of you has all the abilities. You've just forgotten. So if you see a weather system, don't broadcast it. That's amping the louche. You keep it quiet and you use your imagination to break it up. If it works, fine. You have a nice smile to yourself and keep it to yourself. The worst thing you can do is out it. Puts you right under attack. So use them abilities. Right. I've been told the mention of the debt ceiling portion of the show kind of went missing, so I will repeat that again. The main issue that the Houston event was to collect funds because they have none, so it keeps the liquidity going. They're now talking about increasing the debt ceiling, because the debt ceiling has been clamped, which is beneficial because it then doesn't allow them to print more money, which largely, as you already know, in this country goes on war spending. Not looking after the people. Oh no. War. So the elements in the government, rogue, are now preparing, and no doubt also coming with pressure from certain clowns, are preparing a $60 billion increase in the debt ceiling, and they're going to present it to the public for the damages caused by Hurricane Harvey. Well, I'm not being funny, but we've all been paying hurricane insurance premiums for the last 10 years when there's hardly been any that's made a landfall. So why aren't insurance companies paying for it? Or do they, just like the government, just collect it for themselves and don't spend it out? These are the type of things that's got to change. You pay insurance for allegedly for a reason, not for them to keep it and go and spend it on CEOs' ridiculous wages. No, it's supposed to be a protection for and by the people, for the property. So Harvey's happened, so the insurance should pay. But you know full well what's going to happen next. They're going to cry poverty. Why? Because they've spent it all. Agenda-driven nonsense, again, largely to do with wars. So this 60 billion increase that they're proposing before the end of September, that's going to be masked up as damages, actually contains a war budget and funding for other things that was not mentioned. A bit like the Patriot Act. Or more prevalent, the Paris Climate Agreement, which in tiny font, in about the 1 millionth page, told you that every country had to hand over all their in-ground resources. Yeah, right. So the 60 billion debt ceiling increase is nothing to do with Hurricane Harvey, period. Because we have insurance companies to pay for that. And if they've spent it, then start arresting them. Because they haven't been spending out on hurricanes for most of the last 12 years. Where's all the insurance money from Florida? Because not only did we pay the homeowners insurance, we had a separate hurricane fund added in to other insurances to boost up the hurricane fund. Car insurance. They haven't spent it in 12 years. Where's all that money? Where's all the money from the CAFA accounts? Supposed to be known as saving things for a rainy day. Well, we've just had catastrophic rainy days, so take the money out of the CAFA accounts and pay for the damages. So that, again, is the people's money. Now, we all know the cabal's been dipping into that as well, where they take a couple of million out, put it on one of their hedge fund bets or whatever other bullshittery they do on the market, make a load of money and put it back. And they've walked away with all the profits, with the people's money. So increasing the debt ceiling is purely to keep the illusion going that America, the country, is thriving and has full employment capacity, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard yet. We'll just roll on. Now what they'll roll on is they'll roll into another war. That's what the 60 billion is for. Forget Houston. So I hope that covers it up. But the intel, even what I put out and you read between the lines, is littered with positivity. Right, some questions with what's time's left. I wanted to read Kevin Annett's story, but I'll have to hold that off till next week. No, apologies to Kevin. Kevin's just put out a new document as well. I met Kevin last week. Very interesting man. And you can see the pain. We're talking about trauma and pain. It's riddled in that man's eyes of what he's seen, heard. Some heart-wrenching stories in what's gone on in Canadian schools and hospitals, all to cover up the abuse and pedophilia and ritual sacrifice done by elites, including the Canadian Mounted Police and the judges. They're all involved in it. He's took a massive burden on that a lot of people wouldn't be able to handle. Hearing about kids being cut up, chopped up, I might add, sexually abused at 4, and then cast aside. It's not an easy role to take on. That's what to me it gets a bit annoying when anyone feels guilt for the people who are not awakened. We've taken enough. I'm sorry, but we just have. Their ignorance is no longer forgivable. It just isn't. So we had a rather pleasant afternoon, but you can see it in the man's face. It's beggars belief, it really does. Some of the heinous acts that go on, I think most people are aware of it, and have certain things that may be comfortable with. What you'll probably find out at a later date. Maybe you won't, but I don't think finding out the depth of it is going to make it any better, or any worse for that matter. But the levels of it is, it literally borders disbelief. It really does. What date was the Universal Protection show on Th&I? It was August the 25th. Yeah, it's August 25th, 2016. 1 year anniversary just gone. That's on thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org, so you can go on there and find it, or you'll find it on the Spreaker, Tommy Williams channel, and I think it's also on the YouTube channel, Tommy Williams, as well, so you should find it. I would very much like drawings or otherwise images of the way the races beings look that are working for the good of humanity. As other images from races on the internet are not correct, I would very much like to know the people beings that are there for us. Good luck with that. A lot of who is helping is largely being kept quiet for various reasons. Safety of individuals, both human and non. Because what we've found over time is all of these have been threatened, or a large portion have been threatened or coerced into doing things at the behest of others. It's not something they were comfortable with, but they were threatened. A lot of the grey races come under that category. They don't particularly like the Draco either, or the Mantids, but they're like puppets. You know, so I think there's been sufficient movies now that shows enough beings to gather an image from. Whether those beings are working for the benefit or not, you can't base it on. It's like saying all humans are good or all humans are bad. No. There's good and bad humans in one household. But there's a lot of, in essence, former bad guys, both beings and humans, who are now helping. They've saw the light. They've realised the lies have gone on every single level, and some have chosen to carry on and ignore it because they don't want to believe it. That's their choice. They'll learn the hard way, because they're going to have to face it eventually, like the Rothschilds. Their day of reckoning is rather close, because now their own people are turning on them. That's the pressure. The good guys, if you want to call it that way. What we've done, we've put them in a financial stranglehold, where they then become competitive with each other which is why the factions are taking each other out, and then they're exposing each other. Well, that not only applies here, it applies elsewhere with other races. Because this is going on universal. The clearing and the masks of illusion are coming down for everyone. That's a directive straight from source. Return to balance. So as I said, there's plenty of images on certain shows that show, the greys and the reptilians, of which there are many. Reptilians are different from the Draco. And then you get into some of the more funky beings, the aquatics, who are in contact currently. They weren't human favourable at once, but now they're willing to help, and this is the way it's gone. What will it take to stop, defund geoengineering, weather warfare? Will measures against this be written into any treaties? Eventually, yes. Once we get all the countries sovereign, because currently a lot of countries cannot sign treaties because they're not sovereign, and certainly the UN are not sovereign, so they can't sign any. Yet again, an example of the strangulation of the cabal and their rogue corporations. How to stop it? Use your abilities. Just believe. You don't have to ask people, how do you do it? You have something called imagination. It works a lot more than you realise. It's like the dream time, or what's known as the dream time. We may all find out one day that was living, and the daytime is the dream time. Of course, you can fly. Lots of people reporting being able to fly. And then some may see a whole range of beings of all different shapes and sizes and think it's just imagination. But your imagination can't interpret something that doesn't exist. So when you're seeing some of the strange looking ETs in Dreamtime, they're real. You cannot imagine something that doesn't exist. Received a letter from a lady activist in Philadelphia, and she mentioned about water fluoridation. That is moving along, by the way, because that's gaining more and more traction of what's going on, and I can't see that lasting too much longer. Anyway, this lady said she's been involved with ending fluoridation for 4 years now, which is no time at all compared to some activists. Well, everything helps. And as you can imagine, there's little progress. I beg to differ. There's more progress than people realise. It just hasn't manifested itself yet, but it will. I do see more of acknowledgement from people about the problem, but there's absolutely no political will to take any action. No, they can't. Again, this is where people have to really grasp the bull by the horns. If you're thinking that political people have the ability to change anything, you're not thinking in the right manner. They have none. It's all to do with the string pullers, the puppets on the string. So they may turn around and say, oh, that's awful, I don't agree with you. And then they get into that theatre called the Senate or the House or the Congress. And now they have no say in the matter. None whatsoever. So she said she recently got a Philadelphia councilman to agree to proposing legislation which would generate a public hearing, but then he backed out immediately. Yeah, that's what happens, because then they bring it up and then they find out they have no real clout whatsoever, and they get told to scrap that, otherwise we'll threaten your children, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. That's why it needs all of them to stand up and go and F yourselves. You have no authority anymore, because they don't. It's only the illusion. Can you tell us about the Book of the Damned? No, I can't. I don't read books. Sorry, Dad. Particularly one from 1919. How old do you think I am? Drake? No, I did take a brief glance at it before, and there's a couple of interesting lines in the first. So maybe one day when I get 1 minute to myself per week, I might finish that book before the end of my days. Is this Texas disaster a lame attempt at a cabal to generate funds from fake charity donations? 100% correct. Another question from the email. I've been watching a video with Dr. Richard Blasband states that Nikolai Levashov changed his brain to match his, for Blasband to have the abilities to heal his patients more effectively. Blasband said that he calls Nikolai 3 times a week and states that Nikolai can make his spirit evolve because he can do it. And the question this person has, how is it that someone can give their self over to Levashov to advance spiritually and have gifts of healing bestowed upon them without working through it, through a self-governed process of mind, body and soul? Well, Mr. Levashov spent quite a bit of time in California and had a number of friends there, and some of them were in the medical. In fact, they were in many different fields, and he provided a lot of help. So one of the things you stated further on, it was stated that Levashov would not teach anyone that was not professional. Exactly. He had his own standards, so the guy must have been, at the time, whether he is now, I don't know, at the time working professionally. You can't start interfering with the healing of others if you don't know what you're doing. And that's where Levashov came from. And so, yeah, technically, the guy called Mr. Blasband got a bit of a leg up, so to speak. But if he's doing it to help, does that matter? Mr. Blasband must have had certain structures or frequencies to himself that would have enabled Nikolai to be able to do what he did. So it's not as if he's given it to anybody. Mr. Blasband must have had certain frequencies to be able to accept it. Next question on this: is it okay to open oneself up on the YouTube channel to receive healing from one of the Levashov videos? Yes, I have used some of them. Like everything else, you do your clearing first, your own grounding and centering and shielding. We have the document on MeWe and also on the Think Different site and also on the Facebook page. Levashov and Blasban practiced in the most affluent, wealthiest cities in Marin, California, across the Golden Gate Bridge of San Francisco. To live and have an office in this part of the Bay Area, one must acquire great wealth. So I presume by the tone of this question that you're questioning their motives. Well, Mr. Levashov, have you read the book Mirror of the Soul 1 and 2? Did most of his work for free. He helped people, and those same people, it's funny how you help people for free, you always end up getting shafted. And Mr. Levashov got shafted a number of times by people losing it with their own ego, going around bragging, making he'll this and he'll that, and please give me X amount of dollars or X amount of pounds or X amount of euros. But it wasn't your ability to begin with. It was what Mr. Levashov entrusted you with. And this is the way people go. They always abuse it for their own ego. And Levashov struggled with that, where he was helping many people. Yeah, there's one particular story where he healed a woman that was dying, and then she went. He only charged, if memory serves me correctly, he only charged travelling fees. Well, basically, this woman was on a death note. Mr. Levashov cleared it all, and the doctor was bemused because suddenly it was all gone. Then when it came time to pay Mr. Levashov, they said, well, we think that the doctor's diagnosis was rubbish, and so you didn't cure anything and didn't pay him. So Mr. Levashov then warned them, if you continue that path, your wife will be gone within a year. She died one day before that year came up. And this is the way people always have a mistrust. It's like myself with the foundation. People have gained a large trust of me, but there's always a mistrust until it starts off. Well, what's he doing with those funds? Well, we have put last year's tax returns. But people, for ego, their own ego and their own advancement, see it as an opportunity to elevate the self, when it's not about elevating the self, it's about helping the all. So maybe Mr. Blasband has gained a lot of wealth after Mr. Levashov died. He was murdered, by the way. Maybe he thought Nikolai out the way, he can go and charge excessive prices. Well, Levashov's not responsible for that. So I hope that answers the questions. But, read Mirror of the Soul 1 and 2, and then you get a better understanding. Right, I think that's about it. Can babies get transgendered while in the womb? Their genetics can be interfered, where the male can be inserted with more female genes and vice versa. So that then opens up the possibility of that person feeling in the wrong body. Those people are few, to be honest. The rest of them are more to do with covering up their own sexuality. It's the hidden shadow side that they've not dealt with. And it'd be far easier if they came out and said what they were, rather than disfiguring themselves. That doesn't apply to all of them. It's not in any way broad sweeping the whole lot, but a lot of it to do with they're unable to accept that they're gay. And that's sad in many ways in itself. But some of the interference with the chemicals has created that situation of the increase of the transgender. Of course, you've also got other policies in China, because there's a lot of, what do they call them over there, lady boys as they call them. And the simple reason is there's not enough women. So that's a world policy, or countrywide policy of creating, trying to limit the amount of children the Chinese people have down to one. And they're very proud of the family name in China. And so if they don't have a male, then the family name ends. So if the first child or the second child is a girl, there's an awful lot of Chinese females being killed at birth because they want the family line name to continue. So suddenly you've got a massive imbalance of too many males, which then leads, everyone's got sexual needs with a crossover. Right, I think that's it for tonight. So there's plenty to think about in the second hour. Be wary of the charities of Houston. Be wary of more planned events to take more money off the people. Don't give. We're on the end of the strangulation of the financial, and it had to be done to end their ability to stifle humanity by using the financial tool as power. Just don't allow them to kick it on another day or another week by donating to bogus charities that goes to the same bogus cabal people. But other than that, things are going rather well. Right, I'll be back next Sunday in an all Scouse show. English people will know what that means. So whether you all understand our interaction on Sunday remains to be seen. I'll try to keep my half American, half British accent, but I may end up slipping into my Liverpool Scouse, being with John Bryan, but we'll see. And so I look forward to that on Sunday at 4:30.